We're here with Melissa Daniels, who's finally hit the big time on the Orita Podcast. Melissa, thank you for making the time. I think of you now as my conference buddy because I see you at every e-commerce conference that I go to. For those who don't know me, I'm Aaron Schwartz, one of the founders of Orita. We build AI segments for a bunch of awesome brands, Spanx, Run Beauty, Tracksmith, you name it. We are not talking about Orita today. We're going to talk about Melissa, her background, being a journalist at the time of AI, yada, yada, yada. So my turn to be quiet. Melissa, can you please give a proper intro to yourself? Go through your background. I find it fascinating. So please take it away.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I'm so thrilled you asked me because I love what you guys do, and I have such a respect for people who commit to that conference circuit. It's really a bear, and I think it's fascinating in and of itself. But yeah, I'm the special projects editor at Modern Retail. I've been here for about 4 years. For those who are unfamiliar, we're a B2B trade publication. We cover the intersection of retail, commerce, and technology, and really just focusing on the ways that the industry is transforming and modernizing.
That's not good enough. Your background, I was
No.
like
Yeah.
looking through it, right? And so like you're a journalism major. Can you walk
Yeah.
us through how you got here? Because like you had such a diverse set of
Yeah.
beats
Well,
that you
I
had.
wanted to be a dancer. I wanted to be on Broadway
Okay.
originally. I didn't even think I was gonna write for a career. I wanted to be a performer. So
Okay.
I wanted to work in theater, and be on a chorus line somewhere. That was the original dream. But then, I thought, well, gosh, I really, should probably have a real career, right? I'm a bootstrapped operation. What can I do to take care of myself and make a living and make sure I can afford health insurance? And, journalism just was really at the top of that list of lucrative fields to go into in 2006, right around the recession.
You know, there was a period of a lot of tech journalists becoming VCs, so you can
Yeah,
always like go down
you
that
should have.
path.
That was a boat I wish I had a ticket on sometimes in retrospect, but here we
Yeah.
are. Yeah. I studied journalism at Syracuse University, and, it really, I mean, if I have to look at the long arc of my career, a big defining through line is that the industry has kept changing, and somehow I've managed to pivot or make leaps at times that kept me just enough ahead of the curve to dodge a layoff or, be
Mm.
at a publication that was trying something new. And I've just done a lot of hopscotching, which, sometimes people will say, well, that's not good for your resume and longevity and stuff like that. But for millennial creators, man, like you just have to survive. So when I got out of school, my first job was covering local news in central New York in the Finger Lakes region. I don't know if you've ever been there.
I haven't. Oh, yeah, I
It's
thought
it's
that was
the
so
wine
cool that you were
country,
going
quote,
local.
unquote, of New York State, and it's beautiful. It's really fun little towns, and I learned a lot there. I had really great mentors and a great community to cover, and I learned how to tell stories. I learned how to gain community trust. I learned how to tell what I call a 360-degree view of a situation. I have written editorials before, but by trade, I'm not an opinion writer. I'm not someone who is, a talking head. My points of view are my personal points of view, but as a journalist, it's my job to explore, to explain, to inform. And, sometimes that's not always comfortable. Sometimes that means you have to get in some topics that people don't want to hear about. And that can be hard to do. But that's where your point of view maybe comes in a little bit of saying, this is a vulnerable community going through a hard time. They need a story told. So I spent a lot of my 20s in local journalism. From New York, I went to Pennsylvania. I covered state politics there for a couple different outlets. I believe I was the first member of the Pennsylvania Legislative Correspondents Association to post on Instagram from the press corps from the Capitol building, which I think is kind of funny when you think of that's just like I use that as almost like a dateline and a point of like that's where my career kind of was. And this was brand new stuff that people were doing and experimenting with an Instagram post, right? And now how many people consume news through short form video and carousels on social media, right? Like a ton of people. So I've seen this whole sort of thing switch and grow and develop. And again, yeah, just sort of chasing interesting jobs and interesting leads. I moved to the West Coast exactly 10 years ago, which is really exciting. I moved to Los Angeles to cover federal courts for Law 360. No, not that I didn't still love journalism and politics and things like that, but I did feel like I wanted to specialize more in what could be a career in business journalism. And I thought covering corporate litigation would be a good way to do that.
Fascinating. That's real. I
Yeah.
was so curious about that switch. That's so interesting.
I needed to pick a lane, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was like the politics stuff was really fun, but I felt like I wasn't there was a moment where I was like, "Oh, I wanna really chase that job of being a correspondent for Congress and in the White
Yeah.
House and stuff like that." But then I realized, like, I don't have the personality for it.
Mhm. You seem
And I
like
have so much respect
kind
for those
and
people.
optimistic and curious and yeah.
I'm a little it's hard. I mean, you have to have a skin that is so thick, and I'm
Yeah.
just not sure I do. I'm kind of a softie, and I'm kind of a these are my tarot cards and my crystals over here, you know what I mean? And, like,
We'll talk about Joshua Tree later. So we'll get to that
we're
part of
gonna
the
get to
program.
that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I was just like but I think business reporting came to me because I had been covering a lot of, like, local development and real estate and transportation and startup companies in Pittsburgh and things like that, and I go, private capital actually is really powerful, and the private sector is just as important as the public sector, if not more so, when you think about what controls people's day-to-day lives these days. You and I interact far more with Amazon than the federal government probably,
Yeah.
right? We interact far more with Target and Walmart and Walgreens and our local grocery store than we do our county government, right? So I just was kind of like, yeah, I think I want to cover more private sector stuff. So I did the law thing, made a quick detour to cover politics again in Arizona because I guess the itch wasn't totally scratched. And I had an amazing offer to serve as a temporary correspondent for the Associated Press in Phoenix
Cool.
during the midterms during Trump 1.0. And I just was back in the fire. And that sort of
Mhm.
told me, yep, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I'm being way too honest. Am I being too honest, Aaron?
No, this is great. I love it. It's like, look, I had a relationship. I was definitely done with it. And I was like, I'm not done with it. And then you're like, I'm definitely done with this.
It kind of was like that. Yeah,
Mhm.
totally, totally. And it's like, I look back at those stories I wrote during that time and I'm so proud of them. It's honestly some of my favorite storytelling I've ever done in my life was my time in Phoenix. And the people that I did and the reporting that I did, and it was such a grind. And like, I mean, listen, not to say I can never say never. You can never say
Sure.
never in this business. Will I be in Sacramento someday? Will I be in DC someday? Would I be in Austin someday? No, maybe. Yeah, maybe I know. I love.
Not Sacramento. You're good. I just took my older daughter to a volleyball tournament in Reno. We got to go through Sacramento again. And I'm like, no, do Austin if you're gonna do it.
You're gonna have to pick a capital city.
Yeah.
That's like high on the list.
Yeah.
Phoenix isn't bad though. Have you been through Phoenix before?
Phoenix is good. You could go to my home state of Ohio and hit up Columbus. It's a wonderful place to be. We'll map out your next steps in your career.
Yeah,
Um,
we can totally get to that because who knows where it's going in this day and age. But yeah, I mean, I felt like I had a great run and I just wanted to see what was next. And I also felt like, how long am I just going to write stories for? How long am I just going to be someone who interviews people and writes about it, knowing what we know about technology? As
yeah.
I mentioned, I was like one of the first people to post on Instagram from a state capital. I'd always had this love for technology and digital media and felt like that was the way it was going. When I was in college, we were like, me and a couple team members were like the first people to ever post a video on the website. We were like trying new things because at the time it was very new
Yeah.
to do journalism on the internet was like a new
Yeah.
thing. You're laughing, but like it's true.
Oh, I
This is
love
how
it.
old I am.
Hey, Melissa, I'm sure you can see my hair right here. I'm following. I'm loving this.
You remember how crazy that was, right?
Mhm.
That it was like Politico launched as an online only publication and people were like, they're going to fail. Like, let that sink in.
Yeah.
And like legacy media was like, there's no way.
Yeah. Well, so um uh I know we're gonna switch into like the mono retail
Yeah.
piece or like going into commerce in a minute, but let me just ask a little bit. Like,
Yeah.
so you had this experience with local politics, right? You had the experience with going into like the corporate and law side. If you think about like your transition into the retail space, like you also kind of mentioned storytelling, right? And you like to go down that path. Like how did all those earlier experiences kind of like influence how you do your job today and what's different? And yeah, I don't know. Like I'd love to hear a little bit about that. And then we can go into what you're doing kind of on the day to day, but I,
Yeah.
I want to
Yeah.
keep it at a higher level to start.
I mean, this is probably a boring answer, but the bones are the same. The
Mm,
way I approach the work is the same.
mm,
Find interesting sources. If people tell me something that's interesting, follow it.
mm,
Have interviews with folks, get as much information as you can. And then the sitting down and writing is like almost exactly the same. Whether I'm
mm,
writing about a campaign or a healthcare issue or a brand marketing initiative or a new store launch, like the serious to, maybe less, I don't want to say unserious because I think retail is really important and I think consumer culture is really interesting and fascinating and
Mm.
fun, but maybe like the stakes are just a little lower, as far as like, hey, this ad campaign is fascinating isn't the same as writing about Obamacare, right? Like it's
Sure.
just not. But the sitting down and writing of how do I make sense of this? What's the most
Mm.
interesting way to get the reader involved? What are the
Mm.
brass tacks they need to know if they're not going to read the full story that I want to make
Mm.
sure they can see within 30 seconds of reading the story?
Mm.
All of that stuff and how you approach creating the thing is like the same, you're still building a house.
For what it's worth, I experienced that as a reader. Like even I was just like even just getting the emails and like the base level summary, it's like, okay, I have a pretty good sense of how to think about what Quip is doing today. Right. I don't even know if that was your story or somebody else's, but like I feel very consistent when I read modern retail that like you actually do get the meat and then you can go deeper and deeper as you want to, which is pretty cool.
Totally. It's part of our structure, and I think I've always kind of tried to write that way, and I think it's made me a better writer to actually work in an industry that I wasn't an expert in when I came to this. So,
Mm.
to fast forward a little bit, I joined Modern Retail 4 years ago, and I did that after COVID, right? And during COVID, I was working as a business reporter at the Desert Sun in Palm Springs, California. From Phoenix, I made the jump to Palm
Mhm.
Springs and got back to business reporting. And it was this beautiful middle ground of the local government stuff I'd done and the business private sector accountability stuff I wanted to pursue with, a dash of I'm a local journalist. How do I show up in digital media on this? And life was amazing and super fun. And I was all set to cover Coachella, and my boyfriend was going to work at Coachella, and we were going to have the best summer and spring of our lives. And then there was a global pandemic. And then my job changed a lot because then we were covering daily case counts and death tolls and daily press conferences from the governor. It was super serious work. And I'm again really proud of a lot of the work I did during then, but it took a lot out of me, and, by the sort of midpoint in COVID, by, like, the end of 2020 there, I'd gotten an offer from a local housing nonprofit. They needed help running communications campaigns around federal, housing grants and the rental assistance that was going out for folks who'd been laid off and whatnot, which was very severe in this area because we lost the hospitality industry that
Yeah,
fuels a lot of the desert.
sure.
So I said, "Yeah, maybe it's time to try brand comms." And at the same time, I was like, hey, maybe it's time for me to think about, again, how to not just write articles for a living and think about other ways to tell stories and think about other ways to be a communicator.
Mm.
So I started pursuing an online master's degree in digital marketing and from Arizona State University. And so I was doing that and working brand comms at this nonprofit. And it just like my brain went in a whole different place, man. Like the storytelling was still huge. And like I worked with this amazing photographer out of LA named Noe Montez. And we would go out into the community and tell stories of people who were, recipients of the rental assistance or were struggling with affordable housing to underscore the need of like, hey, this is like a serious issue. Housing affordability in California is no joke, and people who are working full time with families cannot afford to stay renting, let alone buy a home. And that was this beautiful advocacy storytelling that I'd never really gotten to do before but I took the same sort of, again, 360 approach. Like, what is this person's situation? What is the context here? What does the data say about just how severe the housing burden is? And so that like really splashed off locally and we got like a ton of Instagram followers and stuff out of it, which I get credit to the imagery almost as much as the stories I was writing because I was working with an amazing photographer and I got to stretch my mind in storytelling in so many different ways during that year as a comms person. I was like, man, I really like this. Maybe I need to do more comms work. Maybe I need to do more marketing work. So I'm sitting there, I'm finishing up this degree and I'm trying, like, I'm saying yes to everything. It's like, one of those seasons where you're just like, I'm saying yes. I said yes to every freelance gig. I said yes to every contract. Was doing research. I was doing social media creation. I was doing consulting. I was still writing. I was doing everything. And then I met this lady named Jill Manoff, who was an editor in chief at Glossy.
Mhm.
And I met her in a virtual networking group. And I thought she was so smart. And I loved her approach to fashion and beauty that was still so journalistically sound in the way that I was kind of born and raised. And then her colleague, Kale Weissman, was looking for a reporter who, had good reporting chops. But, I also had this sexy new digital marketing degree and had just done a ton of work about brand campaigns. So I had sort of the mindset of someone who was really like excited about digital storytelling and what that could mean for like a brand or a company or an institution. So I was just like super stoked to take this job. And it was the kind of thing where like I wasn't necessarily like, I can't wait to be a retail reporter one day. But once I realized what I'd be writing about what I was doing, I'm like, oh, this is a perfect fit because I'm also a huge product junkie. I'm also a total clothes horse. And I'm also an extremely thrifty and budget conscious shopper.
This is the right thing.
So all of like my personal interests like also aligned with this as well, because I was like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I'm so into this. And yeah, so it's been an amazing 4 years. We're just coming off of our latest Modern Retail Marketing Summit, where I got to meet a lot of our readers and subscribers in person and do some amazing on-stage interviews with total marketing baddies from Nespresso, Bobby, ThreadUp, Ruggable. And they're just killing it, man. They're just doing so many interesting things at a time when nobody knows what the right move is. And yeah, I just leave these things feeling really inspired and excited about what people can do in this industry.
I love it. It's really beautiful that you were able to find like space that is of interest to you personally. But to your point, you mentioned like Kale and Jill being able to work with brilliant people who have, unique perspectives and like the depth of understanding where it's not just surface level, let me post something, but they actually, I don't know either of them, though I've read for years. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's clear that like depth matters. It's not just cool. How do we go get some more clicks?
Exactly.
It's really wonderful. I actually want to talk about you for a minute as a creator, because you kind of mentioned that. I am curious, like you're obviously like digitally native, right? You made the Instagram comment and you think about this, right? And part of the draw was like, you just done this degree and you're able to explore. How do you find the balance between like modern retail versus like Melissa? And where does you kind of posting content and like making your voice heard, where is it helpful to kind of like your journalism on some level? Like do people knowing who you are, does it help you get interviews or like get sources that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise? And so therefore you need to curate that? Or is it more like, look, I just want to write great content, whatever it takes? Like, how do you find that balance?
Yeah, man. This is like therapy now. This is like getting into like my
Let's
identity.
do this. Grab the crystals. Now we're in the crystals and
Now
the candles.
I know, like, let me center myself and see what their truth is saying. For me, it's like, okay, so I've always had this career as a journalist. Like, that is a
Yeah.
part of my identity. That is a part of how I see myself. As such, I am not an oversharer online. I am not someone who does get ready with me's. I'm not someone who, is out there with my every opinion on every topic or breaking news story because as a trained journalist, my opinions are private. What I write and what has a byline under it is my work. You know, that said, there has been so much change in this industry with people wanting to know who journalists are, wanting to know where we stand and saying, well, what is your point of view? What is your bias? So I started a Substack a couple years ago, actually, and I'll actually hopefully have a new edition out this week. But I use my Substack as a way for people to get to know me a little better and also sort of span all the work that I do. So that's one way that I find works. But for example, my Instagram is private. I don't need people who are my sources like looking at my kids necessarily before they talk to me. But at the same time, like there's PR people and people at companies who've become my friends because I've worked with them for 4 years now. And so then you make that point where you're like, all right, we're going to follow each other on the gram so we can send each other memes. Like you just get to that point with people sometimes and the relationship changes. And that's like, okay, then, but you know what? There's plenty of other sources to talk to. Like there's that level of just people in your network and how those relationships
Mm.
change. And this is common, I think, to any professional. I mean, competitors become colleagues, right? Or, people you were across the aisle from at one point become someone on your team. And that's just
That's it.
the industry in some ways.
Now
You're
my therapy.
smiling.
I
Yeah.
literally, before this, was texting with an ostensible competitor who I used to be an advisor to, who I like, they're so smart and I deeply respect. And they've like started to encroach in our space. But it's in the right way. Like they're building really good products and
Cool.
it's like serves your brands. And before running a couple of commerce tech companies, I ran a brand for a decade. And so like I literally have hit this point in the ecosystem where I'm like, guys, this is not politics. This is not COVID. This is like e-commerce. And we're supporting, again, I serve, let's say smaller brands, like maybe Shopify Plus, but not like big global retailers like you're interviewing. But
Mhm.
obviously you see the whole stack. But I'm like, we're helping entrepreneurs and small businesses, right? And like people with a dream, like accomplish it. We should be playing in a way that like is supportive of them and like in a positive way, in an abundant way. And I feel like I'm officially at the point of like seeing the like negative side of commerce
Mm.
tech in a way that I hadn't, like I've always been just like really optimistic and like, yeah, let's go.
Oh,
There's a big space. And so it is interesting, like, when you think about like, I don't know, this isn't like a global tragedy. This isn't something that like should be
no.
negative. It should be a positive ecosystem. And I,
Mhm.
I think I very much appreciate that in like your reporting and even like what you guys are covering, which is like, look, this is serious and this is real business and this is like serving people, but this is not like, my God, everything falls on this. And if a company screws up, like shame on them. I don't know.
Well, yeah, and it's like, what are the stakes here? What are the
Exactly.
actual stakes here? And that really changes depending on the story, And, to that point about like relationships, it's like it's all relationships,
Mm.
getting good stories and having good sources, it's all relationships. And so I feel like the way I position my relationships is how I figure out how to like when I know there's a good story to tell and I'm like, I
Mm.
really need someone to help me explain X, Y, and Z to the reader. And I know the exact person who to call. That's like the
Mm.
best feeling because that
Sure.
tells me I've done a good job rounding out my network. And on the flip side, where I don't have that right exact person to call, then it's time to go hunting in the inbox.
Mm.
And I recently coined the phrase that my inbox is business news Tinder because that's what it feels like.
I love it.
'Cause it's so chaotic and there's, like, all the good, all the bad, and you're just kind of like, "Is this a fit?"
You know,
Swiping
I was
through.
I was married before Tinder, so I never got to fully experience this, but now I will go look
Bless
through my
you.
inbox and do this. Yeah, bless you. Thank you. Um, what are there ever the conflicts? Like you have relationships, people trust you, and like to your point, like you're a journalist, you're just trying to get to ground truth, right? You're not trying to like
Yeah.
start a flame war or do stuff for the sake of it.
No,
And
no, that's not my style at all.
of
Yeah.
course not. I mean, like, I know as a reader, but like you have contacts who like sometimes you're like, look, your company's not doing a good job or like your competitor is doing better. Like, how do you find that balance when you're kind of like managing those relationships? Is it just like, look, guys, there's just a wall where like, I'm going to report as I report?
Yeah, you just have to be honest, and, I've gotten better at it as I've gotten older. Weirdly, I think I've gotten better at it since I've become a mom
Mm.
because when you're a parent, I feel like your time crunch you just schedule your time differently and you don't have time to, like, be insecure about things anymore. Like, my day is too busy and I have, X amount of hours while, like, kiddo's at the babysitter's, and what am I gonna do, like, in the
Mm.
meantime? And I don't wanna have this whole big thing with this person, so I just say, "Look," and this happens there's people there's, like, PR agencies and sources within companies both where, I've known these folks for years, and they're like, "Hey, we're doing this really cool thing. Can you write about us?" And it's like, "No, it's not that interesting." And I just have to say that. Or, if I really just am honest. I said, at this point, I maybe file 1 or 2 stories a week, and I really need it to be something that applies to a broad sector of our
Mm.
readers, and I've already got irons in the fire through mid-May. So, like, no,
Mm.
it's not gonna be a fit this time. And, or the best you'll get from me with a rejection is saying, "Well, I have been toying with the idea of doing a feature story on X, Y, and Z. If you think they could have some data about how that,
Mm.
is performing in this section or what this
Sure.
platform is doing for them, I would love to feed that into a broader story when they're ready to talk." And 9 times out of 10, I don't hear back. But usually it's like, if it's not a perfect fit and I'm feeling generous with my time and I'm feeling organized about my itineraries that day, I'm able to be like, "Well, I am working on this if you want to weigh in."
How do you, I mean, it makes a ton of sense. And it's also very gracious to say like, look, if you can solve this problem for me, like I'm happy to include you.
Yeah, well, like, here's what I am working on.
Like I've got my priorities lined out. It's like essentialism. I love it. You mentioned that recently you were interviewing people on stage, and obviously a lot of your work is like diving deep. How do you get past the like, look, I have my talking points. I'm going to tell you this story. How do you get them to like really open up? Is it just time and like sometimes, in a 30-minute on-stage interview, that's not the job to be done, and so it's more about like building a relationship, or I don't know. How do you get to the ground truth?
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I'm glad you asked because you're someone who does spend a lot of time at those conferences, and you've seen a lot of those people on stage having those conversations, and, like, you know a good one when you see it, when
Yeah.
you see chemistry between a moderator and a panelist, right? The best ones are when I've already interviewed this person half a dozen times, and it's like catching
Right.
up with an old friend. I mean,
Mm,
that's when it's so fun and exciting for both of us,
mm,
and I always prepare. And I always
mm,
prepare because you can just go up and wing it. But when there's lights in your face and anywhere from 75 to 500 people in front of you, you never know what brain
mm,
cell is going to swap out that day.
mm.
And you're not going to be on. So I usually do a prep call and then I handwrite all my notes before I go on stage. So I commit it to memory with a pen and a paper, like the creature from the 20th century that I am. Yeah, dude. I know. Like, this is my life. Like, I
Yeah.
just need a pen and a paper, and like then I can work.
Yeah.
Um, so I do that because then if I am committing the bones of the conversation to memory, then you can improv on top of that, like
Mm,
jazz. You know what I mean? So then it's like, I know we're going to talk about AI. I know we're going to talk about brand campaigns. And I know we're going to talk about like on shelf competition.
yeah.
But then when she says something about, their DTC subscription business growing, and that's also really interesting, I can hit pause on my to-do list because it's in
Right.
my head and say, wait, I want to follow back on that there. And then you maybe get to something deeper that you hadn't talked about before, and they're really excited to share. So it's kind of like knowing the bones of what you want to talk about and then finding the things that maybe are unexpected to you as you're listening and, like, getting them to share more about that and the name of it feeling, like, really fresh and spontaneous. Does that make
Well,
sense?
it does. One of the things I can't imagine in your role is just like the surface area you cover. While it's still like a narrow, all things being equal, it's a narrow space, right? We're talking about like the intersection of retail technology, but it's still massive, right? And you've
Oh,
got
yeah.
big guys and small guys and new technologies, and how are the old and the infrastructure side versus the on-shelf experience versus the customer research.
Totally.
How do you like? What are the topics that you're most interested in diving into next? And it might be something that you're already covering, but like you want to keep peeling back that onion. Like where are you drawn to right now?
Yeah. No, it's such a good question because it's evolved so much over the
Mm,
4 years I've been here, and it's evolved based on, what my duties are and who else is on the team, and, like, right now, I co-host our podcast, so that is a lane I'm in, and that is kind of like being a true generalist at times. But for, like, things I'm writing about and really sourcing on and covering, right now it's supply chain. We launched a supply chain newsletter in the last couple months that I'm curating for us, and it's fascinating, and it's like I think some people think it's, like, the unsexy part of retail, but it's so yeah, it's like it's so intense and it's everything. When you think about COVID, you think about tariffs, you think about the ways that, like, the global and political systems affect what businesses can do. I'm
mm.
fascinated by it, and I think this is where maybe some of my government and policy and legal brain get to play a little bit too. So that's
Are there
been really, really fun.
specific like aspects of supply chain right now that you're like most curious about diving into, whether it's for journalism or just for like your own, like, I'm super curious how this part works?
Yeah, yeah, I have, like and in that list is like that is a Venn diagram that becomes a circle over time, right? Because as a journal you get so curious about these things, and then you're, like, talking about it over drinks with people, like, because 'cause you're just a nerd then, like, about what
Uh-huh.
but the first part for me, it's sustainability, and people roll their eyes. No, how do you make products better? How do you make products smarter? We know microplastics are bad. We know this stuff is in landfills. We
Mm,
know we're polluting countries all over the world. So how do we do better?
mm.
Answering that question, the more I can spend time answering that question, the more my cup is full.
Interesting. Are there
Yeah.
I don't want you to play favorites, but are there companies that you're looking at or parts of that sector that you're like interested in? Not that you're co-signing that they're great at what they do, but you're like, it feels like these guys are at least like solving this problem in a unique way or approaching it.
Yeah. Well, there's an easy peg because the story just went up today. So I have an easy answer for
Let's
that
do
as
this.
far as relevancy. Yeah. But our supply chain newsletter this week looked at a company called Suri, Suri. They're out of the
Mm.
UK. They make electronic
Oh,
toothbrushes.
that's very cool
Yeah.
brand.
Really cool brand, plant based
Mhm,
brush heads that can
mhm.
be recycled. And now they've figured out a way to take all those recycled brush heads and turn them into soap dishes. And they're going to start just making new products out of the recycled pieces. They found a manufacturing partner to do that with. And I loved talking to the co founder about that because he was like, listen, like, we know we're not going to change the world. We know we're not going to reverse climate change with a recycled toothbrush head. However, is there a way to do something smarter? Is there a way to make sure that these things don't get into the landfill? They've had a lot of success in the UK. They've got a 35% return rate for their trade-in program on the brush heads, which if you've ever looked at return rates for recycling, I mean, yeah, that's like higher than the overall recycling rate in the US, like overall. And
Mhm.
this is just for toothbrush heads from one company, right? So they're doing something right. And now they just launched in Target. So we'll see how they can fare in the US with an on shelf customer and what they can do to get them into the take back program. And like, for me, that's the mindset though. It's like, we're not trying to save the world. We're not trying to reverse climate change. We're just trying to be responsible with the end of life for our product.
Mm.
Like that, every company should ask itself that question in my mind.
Just to put you on the hot seat, has your research in this space kind of changed yourself as a consumer? Because earlier on the conversation, you mentioned like, like I like buying, I like exploring, I like this is my industry.
Yeah, I get asked this question a lot actually. And I
Mm.
mean, I'm even more of a secondhand shopper now, honestly. A lot of the brands that I love probably don't know that I love them because I bought them on ThredUp or Poshmark or a Facebook buy sell trade group.
Or like the post-purchase, I cannot believe I'm blanking on the name of the company. Jake is the CEO. Right, like the aftermarket, like getting customers to sell to each other is just
Oh,
wonderful. Even
totally. Yeah, like there's Treat, there's Trove, there's a
Treat,
lot of
sorry,
really
thank
cool
you.
companies out there.
Oh,
Yeah, I
my
love them. I love what they
Treat, yeah,
do. And I think it's a fascinating model. And I think they're just at the start, honestly.
yeah. Uh,
I saw something, I think there was it Abercrombie maybe? That they had like an in-store display in one of their New York stores of like quote unquote vintage items. And it was like resale of like their older lines of stuff. And I'm like, that's so cool. Like people love that. Why not own it? You know? I think that's a really smart business decision. And that's where
I
the magic is for me. I mean, my own habits, though, it's like, I think I've probably gotten a little cleaner too on things
mm,
like, am I buying something that has chemicals that are harmful? Some of that might just be becoming a mom too,
I was gonna say
and
it
like,
also is just having little ones in the house makes you think a little bit harder about what you're
totally,
doing.
do I want to just pour bleach on my tub and call it a
It's
day?
fine.
Or is there another way to do this?
Should I take a bath in Diet Coke, or is that not a good um, it's
Totally.
so funny. Um, I need to, and I'm so sorry, but I need to talk a little bit about AI. And in particular, you were
No,
talking about
I'm here for the conversation. It's fine.
have you
Yeah.
heard of this fad? It's like Bitcoin. It's like, okay. So what I'm most interested in right now is like you're interviewing amazing marketing leaders from like global brands, right? Like companies that we all know. And you're spending a lot of time, I'm sure, yes, on stage, but also like behind the scenes. What is the like, how big is the delta between like what people are expecting to be able to happen in their function and what is actually happening today? And like, are there like green shoots of like amazing things happening? Or is it just like, I don't know, this feels like a lot of gobbledygook right now. And I'm curious what you've observed.
No, I think I'm glad to hear that someone in your position who like literally runs a technology company also feels like it's gobbledygook. I feel like that's very
Oh,
affirming and validating.
look, Melissa, I'm a history major and an MBA, so I'm not the number one technology. Like, luckily, I have co-founders who
You're
are
not a
brilliant.
coder. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I'm just, I just run a podcast. I don't really do anything.
Yeah, same. I mean, what no, but you learn, right? You learn. And I think technology serves the greatest interests and the best use cases when there are multiple viewpoints involved. And I think if you look at AI from a purely technologist perspective, you're doing it a disservice and you're doing the world a disservice. Like, I think you need to look at this thing holistically from a ethical standpoint, from a psychological standpoint, from a creative standpoint. You mentioned Quip earlier in a story that we've got up. It's by my modern retail colleague, Allison Smith, who's just an amazing journalist.
Mhm.
And we're so lucky to have her because she does a lot of really great work. But she wrote this really smart piece about how Quip, another toothbrush company, we're not sponsored.
We're sponsored by Crest, unfortunately.
Let's get it. So they did this really like funky, silly, weird looking ad with like kind of a giant talking
Mm.
mouth, and people thought it was AI, but it wasn't. They had done it on a set with a model and miniatures, and they had like real, like prop
Yeah.
masters and creatives like building this funky ad.
Oh,
And they had planned to do like a behind the scenes of how we made the ad, but they had to put it out sooner than they thought because people were like, "This is AI slop" in the comments, right?
great.
And I'm just like, yeah, dude, like people don't want to see that. Like that's where we're at right now. People don't want to see that. They want you to pay photographers to take great photos. They want you to
Uh-huh.
pay real models. They want you to pay real writers. Like that's what people want. They don't want AI to do all that.
Uh-huh.
That said, that said, we know the use cases for AI are profound and that there's so many interesting things you can do. I actually recently I wanted to get like outside of my retail and e-commerce bubble for a moment, and I decided to go back to Quinnipiac University, who's one of my favorite pollsters out of the East Coast. They do a lot of really amazing political reporting, and Quinnipiac put out an AI survey recently. What did they find? That, guess how many people use AI to research topics they're curious about?
Knowingly using AI, so not including like Google something, I don't know, 10%?
51.
Oh, shit.
51% of respondents said they use AI tools to research topics they're curious about. And
Oh,
that's just topics. That's not shopping. That's
yeah, yeah,
topics.
yeah. Hmm.
Guess what that's up from the same time last year?
10%. I'm going to keep going with my same number.
37%. Yeah. But still, what? That's like almost that's like what, I can't do math in my head right now, but that's like a
It's a lot.
30% year over year increase
Yeah.
in percentage points, right? So like, yeah, to me, that says people want shortcuts. They want help.
Yeah.
Apply that to commerce, though. We did have a really great speaker, Mary Beach from Thorne. Are you familiar with Thorne, the supplement
Uh,
company?
I'm not.
Really cool company. They've been around a long time
Check
and
it
they
out.
started more in the medical space and they just kind
Hmm.
of became DTC in the last few years, really, after being around for decades, kind of, selling in physical therapist's office and things like
Mhm.
that. They do the creatine, they do protein,
Oh,
magnesium, all that jazz that everybody says they need, whatever.
I mean, you and I don't need stuff like that. We're just naturally, we're fine.
The protein maxing got me lately though now. I'm like, I
Oh, God.
ordered a jar of
Ninety
powder and I'm
grams.
putting it in, I've
We,
got a magic
we've gone through
bullet
this.
and
Yeah. Sorry. Good luck.
I'm a protein smoothie person now. That's for another show. Um that's for another show. But it got me. Writing about this stuff for the finally got me. I was like,
We're
probably
going to just do a podcast about the supply chain of creatine and just like, you're just going to go down these like
yo,
random.
I have a really good story up from a couple months ago about the magnesium supply chain, actually.
Oh,
So I've been there.
I'll go check that out.
It's a good
Very
one.
curious.
It's fascinating just because it's exploded so much.
Uh-huh.
You really got to find it and source it right. In any event, Thorne, they put out, just that great little AI chatbot that comes up when you go onto their website to say, what can I help you find today? And what they found was that when people were using the tool, AOVs went up, people were getting what they needed, but they weren't seeing high, like starting conversation engagement. They weren't seeing high levels of people being like, yes, I'm
Wow.
happy to talk to this bot. So what they did do was put like embedded links kind of all over the site and on PDPs to sort of have the AI help you in your own shopping journey. So if you go on their site and say you're like, okay, I want to look at this creatine powder, on the PDP, you're going to see like links and little bubble points that you can click on. What are the ingredients in this? How many times a day do I take it? What are the desired effects? And you click on that, and that's the answer the AI bot is going to give you. But it's prompting you almost as part of the PDP experience. And I thought that was a super smart use of their own technology.
I like that. I mean, it's like educating the customer. Why do we matter? Because I think something that gets missed is there's probably a faster conversion path, but I bet it is a much worse retention path. right? Because like somebody will buy something because, it's cool. Let me try it out. But if you actually slow it down and you educate, and I bet their post-purchase experience similarly is educational.
You need all
Like,
that to be right. Yeah.
yeah, like that'll pay off in a big way. Um, when you're talking to like marketers, so like obviously you're talking a little bit about the consumer experience, but from the like, I'm building a marketing function, I am trying to get our brand out there. Do you think there is there like, I don't know the right way to ask this, but is there general optimism? I realize it's always like it depends. Is there like, the tools aren't keeping up with my needs yet, or I really need to turn over my team because we have folks who just aren't as adept with the new tooling? Like, are you experienced or like kind of seeing anything more thematically at this point?
Well, I wish people would talk to me more about talent and turnover and
Mm,
internal operations. That's something businesses
yeah,
don't like to talk to reporters about because it feels a little
sure.
too, I don't know, it just feels too internal, feels too gossipy maybe for them.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I think there's a ton of talent stories to be told. I just need the brand to tell me, on the record. That said, I think as far as, like, tools and platforms, like, the word that I keep hearing is community, that if you can
Mm,
build a community, you will have better retention, you will have more loyal
mm,
customers, and that, maybe that's for Thorn, for example, Reddit is really big for them because supplement people love looking on Reddit, and so
right.
how do they show up there, excuse me, in an organic way? Um there's a lot of companies that still have like hella strong Facebook groups. I think people sometimes write off the power of the individual's Facebook profile and the way that
Mhm,
people are spending a lot of time there still. I spend a lot of time on Facebook. It's probably embarrassing, but I do a lot of sourcing there. I
mhm.
do a lot of catching up with my family there. And I do a lot of personal shopping and errands running there.
Sure. Turns out they're pretty good at what they do. Like,
You know,
you may not be
there's
the coolest.
again, this is another podcast. We could do a whole other podcast.
I'm very biased. My wife worked for the company for about 13 years. So,
Oh,
but yeah,
wow.
it
Good for
turns
her.
out she did some cool stuff. She actually did the events product for a while. So like like go to concerts or go to farmers market. So she loved the like
Cool.
actually bringing people together in real life was a very big deal.
That's community. Here's what I'm saying. Like I also feel like we see this a lot with how brands are showing up at big cultural moments. Like this year, I've
Mm,
done a lot of reporting and talking to brands who showed up at like the Super Bowl or Coachella, and things like that. And I feel like we're going to see it with the World Cup. We'll see it with the Olympics in a couple years. How are you showing up at a big moment to capture that foot traffic and or be relevant online to people who are second screening it or just getting it through their feeds? Like, despite living an hour from Coachella, I didn't go, but like my feed was covered in, oh, here's what Rhoda is doing, here's what Elf is doing, here's all the parties at the hotels and stuff like that. And part of that's probably because I'm geo targeted, but also just because like I'm a girl in my 30s, so they think I like Coachella, right? And I have a lot of music and fashion on my feed already, so it just made sense. I think that is what is separating the, kind of like brands who are still trying to find their identity and those who are building really strong marketing engines. Like if you can show up in person, if you can show up for your community,
mm,
that's great. And maybe it's not in person. I think there are companies that maybe at this point are more on the, enterprise level, but still have people who are really endeared to them because they have really great customer service or because
mm,
the unboxing experience is really great or
mm.
because, you get really good loyalty points and then that endears people to you in a different way. So it's like, how are you making people feel like they're part of your brand? That's always going to be more effective than an Instagram ad.
I really love that framing. I think about this a lot. Again, I ran a brand, and this is so long ago, and we did not have a good outcome. So I could tell you a thousand mistakes. But one of the things we
I
did
want
very
that
well,
podcast.
it's
Come on my show to talk about that.
it was a shit show. So yeah, we'll talk. But no, one of the things that we did very well was actually like tie it to a community. So it was a watch company. We would launch new print on demand watches all the time. We would have our fan base at the time. It was like a Facebook group, whatever it was, or the Facebook page, like vote on the names of the product, what the next design was, and really bring it together.
Cool.
But then on top of that, the packaging had a handwritten note, and it was all about like actually, if somebody had an issue and they didn't love the product, it was an instant refund, right? But it was like, how do we go make sure that you're getting value, and then you feel connected to the brand, and then you give us feedback so we make our product better. And I think the way you're talking about it now is there's a lot of ways to go get very quick distribution, but the best companies are the ones that actually think about that like end customer experience all the way through? Like, is it the right packaging? Is it the right learn flow? Is it a sense, to your point about loyalty? Is there some sense of belonging? Because at the end of the day, almost all these products can be duplicated. It is like not
Yes.
about, you need to have a bar of a good product, but then it's about how do you really deeply connect?
Totally, because how many products are, like, basically the same? No offense to all my favorite children out there, but, like, when you go
Mhm.
shopping, there's a wall of moisturizer, there's a wall of protein powder, there's a whole wall of granola. So what sets you apart that makes me pull you off the shelf than someone else?
Do you maybe just like one more thread to pull on when you think about the brands that stand out, right? And again, you're talking to some of the biggest and the best, but you're also talking to like hyperscalers, and you've been in the space
Oh,
long
yeah.
enough to see people who go up and go down. Is there something to like this sits with the CMO and her ability to like bring everything together? Is it about the people? Is it about like, oh, you just had to hit the like timing right and like get the distribution? Are there any through lines that you see about the best companies that you're covering? And again, I don't mean the biggest, right? But like the ones where it's like they have the most customer love,
Right.
customer loyalty that you would bet would be around in 10 years because they're like deeply connected.
Right. Yeah, and what makes a lasting brand, and how do
Yeah.
you build that? This was actually not to plug our summit again,
Sure.
but this
Please.
came up a lot during our conversations, both on stage and in our small groups, and it's breaking down silos. You
Mm,
had just said, is it people? And it's, does marketing really know what product is doing? There are companies now, Ruggable, Lauren Sherman is the new CMO at Ruggable. She's got product and marketing kind of neck and neck right underneath her. There's a
mm,
new org chart there because marketing and product are so closely intertwined because they want the same outcome. They want a great customer experience, right? And they want people to keep coming back and loving their product and saying great things about it. So
mm,
I think being able as a CMO or being someone in marketing to be able to go to manufacturing, to ops, to financials and say, like, here's what's moving the needle for us right now. And like being able to quantify awareness, if you can do that, being able to sort of
mm,
show how you're moving people through the funnel and be like, this is what's working. And then on the flip side of that, being able to respond to your customer knowingly when something goes wrong. Because if you're someone who has like an acute understanding of your product, when you have people in the comments saying, "This didn't work for me," and blah, 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 and "This didn't work for me." I shouldn't put on that voice. I've also been that commenter. But, like, every brand has dealt with this. Like, let's not pretend that they haven't, right? There's people complaining in your comments. Like, if you
sure.
make a product and you put it on the internet, that's gonna happen
Mm,
to you.
mhm, mhm,
Um, and is your marketing team who's in charge of that channel, your social team, are they prepared to respond to it because they actually know enough about how the product was made to say, well,
yeah.
or when someone says, where is this sourced from? Is this ethically sourced? Can they respond accurately? And I
Mm.
think if they can have that connection between knowing the company that well, that makes a big difference. And I think it's like thinking about brand touching everything is probably a simpler way to say it. And I feel like that sounds a little fuzzy and
No, I don't.
trite, but I
I think
don't think there's any such thing as a small detail now when it's so competitive. If you're trying to like really build something different that lasts and stands out, like there's no such thing as a small detail.
I couldn't agree more, and I love how you framed it. I mean, I'm even thinking going back to your comments about supply chain is like you want to understand the return reasons, and then you want those return reasons to go to the product org so the product org can make the product better and avoid, right? Like you shouldn't just be thinking about did you sell the product, but it's did people keep and love the product, and getting those orgs working together and like breaking down silos is so spot on.
Yeah.
I last week I interviewed Amy Carr, who used to be the CMO at Third Love and has like an illustrious career beyond
Oh,
that. And
cool.
one of the
Yeah.
things, yeah, she's amazing. And then one of the things we were talking about specifically was like her background. And I think she came up as like, it wasn't accounting, but she was at Arthur Anderson back in the day. So like deep analytical skills and actually being able to be in the numbers and understand the data and understand the contribution margin and do that as a marketing leader to then help explain, hey, here's how we're going to go build the business and how we're going to go accomplish like our shared goals to me is something that like
Yeah.
really the best companies are able to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that's a great example of a company too that's like been able to have a lasting presence. They were like kind of a DTC darling originally, like, oh, you can buy a bra online. How
Mhm,
fascinating. And now how many bra companies online are there, right? And
mhm.
they're still in the game and they're still getting
Uh,
recommended.
Melissa, this is awesome. You've
This
given me way too
was
much
awesome.
time. Thanks for spending this hour with me. I want to give you some space at the end. Um, You've 45 things to plug, your private Instagram, your no. Is there any last minute takeaway, like something you want to share that you didn't, or something you said that you want to double click on? And then secondly, where can folks find you?
Oh, man. Well, yeah, I have to mention all the great work that we're doing on the Modern Retail podcast, especially if you're someone who likes conversations about
Mhm.
retail and commerce. You will find yourself in good company there. It's myself and my co host, Gabriella Barco. We
Mhm.
have our staff on, we have guests on. Sometimes it's just the two of us. It's whatever the news of the week kind of merits. And we're just following our nose, right? And of sort of what are the hot topics that retailers and brands are dealing with right now. What are the big sort of themes? Where are the winds changing? And we have a really great time putting the show together. And I love hearing from listeners. I love getting feedback on the show. So that's the biggest thing. Apple,
Mhm.
Spotify, Modern Retail Podcast. My supply chain newsletter, you can sign up for that on modernretail.co if you want to stay in the loop on that. And then for more me, my Substack, melissamdaniels.substack.com, I guess is where it goes. And I've been tinkering with Blue Sky and Threads after, decamping from X many moons ago. So you can also find me on those platforms.
I am not on any of those. I'm on LinkedIn, and now I'm realizing I think I need to get out of LinkedIn. And so maybe I'll go to Blue Sky. I don't know. I need to like
LinkedIn, I mean, here
get
we
a power.
are. It's just part of my day now, man. It's
I
like
know.
I
I
have
know.
coffee and I check LinkedIn. It's just where I'm at.
People who certain age. So good.
Yeah, I
Uh,
know, totally.
oh, it's so cool. Oh, wow, did you see that post? Melissa, thank you. It was really selfishly like delightful for me to get a little bit behind the scenes and understand, like, I've been reading you for years and I love bumping into you, and just like even just exploring your background was really joyful. So thank you for taking the time.
Oh, well, I appreciate the opportunity. I can't wait to talk to you again.
All right. Chat soon. Bye.
Bye.
Hi, I'm Aaron Schwartz, co-founder and co-CEO of Orita.ai. We build AI customer segmentation for some of Klaviyo's biggest brands like Oriana, Spanx, Caraway, Third Love, True Classic, Run Beauty, and on and on. Brands come to us to help find untapped revenue, improve their click rate, drive away mean bots, and a bunch more. You can learn more or get a free customer engagement audit at Orita.ai.